Hi there! Welcome to the Clear Mind podcast. I'm so excited you're here. Cure yourself of excusitis, the failure disease. People, as you think yourself to success, that's what you will study people. You will study people very carefully to discover, then apply success-rewarding principles to your life, and you want to begin right away. Go deep into your study of people, and you'll discover unsuccessful people suffer a mind-deadening thought disease. We call this disease excusitis. Every failure has this disease in its advanced form, and most average persons have at least a mild case of it. You will discover that excusitis explains the difference between the person who is going places and the fellow who is barely holding his own. You will view it that the more successful the individual, the less inclined he is to make excuses. But the fellow who has gone nowhere and has no plans for getting anywhere always has a book full of reasons to explain why. Persons with mediocre accomplishments are quick to explain why they haven't, why they don't, why they can't, and why they aren't. Study the lives of successful people and you'll discover this. All the excuses made by the mediocre fellow could be but aren't made by the successful person. I have never met nor heard of a highly successful business executive, military officer, salesman, professional person, or leader in any field who could not have found one or more major excuses to hide behind. Roosevelt could have hidden behind his lifeless legs. Truman could have used no college education. Kennedy could have said, "I'm too young to be president." Johnson and Eisenhower could have ducked behind heart attacks. Like any disease, excusitis gets worse if it isn't treated properly. A victim of this thought disease goes through this mental process. I'm not doing as well as I should. What can I use as an alibi that will help me save face? Let's see, poor health, lack of education, too old, too young, bad luck, personal misfortune, wife, the way my family brought me up. Once the victim of this failure disease has selected a good excuse, he sticks with it. Then he relies on the excuse to explain to himself and others why he is not going forward. And each time the victim makes the excuse becomes embedded deeper within his subconsciousness. Thoughts, positive or negative, grow stronger when fertilized with constant repetition. At first, the victim of excusitis knows his alibi is more or less a lie, but the more frequently he repeats it, the more convinced he becomes that it is completely true, that the alibi is the real reason for his not being the success he should be. Procedure 1, then, in your individual program of thinking yourself to success, must be to vaccinate yourself against excusitis, the disease of the failures. The four most common forms of excusitis. Excusitis appears in a wide variety of forms, but the worst types of this disease are health excusitis, intelligence excusitis, age excusitis, and luck excusitis. Now let's see just how we can protect ourselves from these four common ailments. 1. But my health isn't good. Health excusitis ranges all the way from the chronic "one don't feel good" to the more specific "I've got such and such wrong with me." Bad health, in 1,000 different forms, is used as an excuse for failing to do what a person wants to do, failing to accept greater responsibilities, failing to make more money, failing to achieve success. Millions and millions of people suffer from health excusitis, but is it in most cases a legitimate excuse? Think for a moment of all the highly successful people you know who could but who don't use health as an excuse. My physician and surgeon friends tell me the perfect specimen of adult life is non-existent. There is something physically wrong with everybody. Many surrender in whole or in part to health excusitis, but success-thinking people do not. One experience happened to me in one afternoon that illustrates the correct and incorrect attitudes toward health. One had just finished a talk in Cleveland. Afterwards, fellow, about 30, asked to speak to me privately for a few minutes. He complimented me on the meeting, but then said, "Team afraid your ideas can't do me much good." You see, He continued, "I've got a bad heart and I've got to hold myself in check." He went on to explain that he'd seen 4 doctors, but they couldn't FMD his trouble. He asked me what one would suggest he do. Well, one said, "I know nothing about the heart, but as one layman to another, here are 3 things I'd do. First, I'd visit the finest heart specialist I could find and accept his diagnosis as final. You've already checked with 4 doctors, and none of them has found anything peculiar with your heart. Let the 5th doctor be your final check. It may very well be you've got a perfectly sound heart, but if you keep on worrying about it, eventually you may have a very serious heart ailment. Looking and looking and looking for an illness often actually produces illness." The second thing I'd recommend is that you read Dr. Schindler's great book, How to Live 365 Days a Year. Dr. Schindler shows in this book that 3 out of every 4 hospital beds are occupied by people who have emotionally induced illness. Imagine 3 out of 4 people who are sick right now would be well if they had learned how to handle their emotions. Read Dr. Schindler's book and develop your program for emotions management. Third, I'd resolve to live until I die. I went on to explain to this troubled fellow some sound advice I received many years ago from a lawyer friend who had an arrested case of tuberculosis. This friend knew he would have to live a regulated life, but this hasn't stopped him from practicing LAI, rearing a FME family, and really enjoying life. My friend, who now is 78 years old, expresses his philosophy in these words. "I'm going to live until I die, and I'm not going to get life and death confused. While I'm on this earth, I'm going to live. Why be only half alive? Every minute a person spends worrying about dying is just 1 minute that fellow might as well have been dead." I had to leave at that point because I had to be on a certain plane for Detroit. On the plane, the second but much more pleasant experience occurred. After the noise of the takeoff, I heard a ticking sound. Rather startled, I glanced at the fellow sitting beside me, for the sound seemed to be coming from him. He smiled a big smile and said, "Oh, it's not a bomb. It's just my heart." I was obviously surprised, so he proceeded to tell me what had happened. Just 21 days before, he had undergone an operation that involved putting a plastic valve into his heart. The ticking sound, he explained, would continue for several months until new tissue had grown over the artificial valve. I asked him what he was going to do. "Oh," he said, "I've got big plans. I'm going to study law when I get back to Minnesota. Someday I hope to be in government work. The doctors tell me I must take it easy for a few months, but after that I'll be like new." There you have 2 ways of meeting health problems. The first fellow, not even sure he had anything organically wrong with him, was worried, depressed, on the road to defeat, wanting somebody to second his motion that he couldn't go forward. The second individual, after undergoing one of the most difficult of operations, was optimistic, eager to do something. The difference lay in how they thought toward health. I've had some very direct experience with health excusitis. I'm a diabetic. Right after I discovered I had this ailment, about 5,000 hypodermics ago, I was warned, diabetes is a physical condition, but the biggest damage results from having a negative attitude toward it. Worry about it, and you may have real trouble. Naturally, since the discovery of my own diabetes, I've got 10 to know a great many other diabetics. Let me tell you about 2 extremes. One fellow who has a very mild case belongs to that fraternity of the living dead. Obsessed with a fear of the weather, he is usually ridiculously bundled up. He's afraid of infection, so he shuns anybody who has the slightest sniffle. He's afraid of overexertion, so he does almost nothing. He spends most of his mental energy worrying about what might happen. He bores other people telling them how awful his problem really is. His real ailment is not diabetes. Rather, he's a victim of health excusitis. He has pitied himself into being an invalid. The other extreme is a division manager for a large publishing company. He has a severe case. He takes about 30 times as much insulin as the fellow mentioned above. But he is not living to be sick. He is living to enjoy his work and have fun. One day he said to me, Sure, it is an inconvenience, but so is shaving. But I'm hot going to think myself to bed. When I take those shots, I just praise the guys who discovered insulin. A good friend of mine, a widely known college educator, came home from Europe in 1945 minus one arm. Despite his handicap, John is always smiling, always helping others. He's about as optimistic as anyone I know. One day, he and I had a long talk about his handicap. "It's just an arm," he said. "Sure, two are better than one. But they just cut off my arm. My spirit is 100% intact. I'm really grateful for that." Another experience, he said, that the right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude and two arms every time. The right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude and two arms every time. Think about that for a while. It holds true not only on the golf course, but in every facet of life. See you tomorrow for our next episode, where we'll dive deeper into curing excusitis and breaking free from the habits that hold us back.